Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show will revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Moosie Drier and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen, along with Moosie Drier, and today we are thrilled to welcome a Grammy-nominated artist who's been a star of stage and screen. She starred on Broadway in such musicals as Promises, Promises, Grease, and I Love My Wife. On TV, she was one of the stars of the beloved sitcom Mr. Belvedere. On film, in the Rodney Dangerfield comedy Ladybugs. She's the co-author of the humorous parenting book, What the Other Mothers Know. She leads the workshop Making the Song Your Own. And most importantly, she's a fellow Brooklynite.
Yeah.
Please help us welcome Ilene Graff. Ilene, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Have you ever thought about how many people came out of, Brooklyn's a huge borough, but it's so kind of unbalanced, isn't it?
Well, that's where the talent is located, I like to say. But
oh God, here we go with the East Coast ganging up on me.
So let's start there, exactly, because that's what I wanted to know. We have a lot to cover, but I want to start by, you grew up in Brooklyn. Where? Which part?
Well, I didn't grow up in Brooklyn. I was born in Brooklyn, but we made the big trip out to Queens when I was 6 months old. But the whole family was in Brooklyn, and my daughter lives in Brooklyn. So you can't get away from it, you know.
Which part? Which part of Brooklyn?
I was born in Bensonhurst. My husband's family and my family were from East New York, and from Queens, I grew up in Glen Oaks and Belrose.
I'm Sheepshead Bay.
Sheepshead Bay. Oh, seafood. Yes. Seafood.
Yes.
Yeah.
You think a lot of East Coast and a lot of Chicago here in LA, you know, in the industry, a lot of transplants. But I first of all, welcome, Ilene. Thank you, my friend. So your parents, were they musically minded?
My parents were both musicians. My mother did not pursue it professionally. My dad did. In fact, they were both music majors at Brooklyn College, and they used to play twin piano concerts. My dad was always in show business. He always played the piano, always sang, and during the war, he was in the Special Services Unit, which did shows for the GIs in the South Pacific. And in his unit were Carl Reiner, Hal David, Maurice Evans, the great Shakespearean actor. It was a very storied unit, and he got to do what he did. And then he had a vocal group all during my childhood called the Beachcombers with Natalie, which was, if not the first, one of the first integrated groups. Natalie was Hawaiian, and that caused controversy at the time, but Arthur Godfrey, who loved Hawaii, loved the group.
It is my very great privilege to be able to appear on Nat King Cole's show tonight. We also have with us Don,
Shep, and Jerry, and we are three-fourths of the Beachcombers. You see, a few years ago, when we were stationed in Hawaii, we met
Natalie.
Beside a shady nook, a moment's blitz we took to talk of love. Be my Valentine, my funny Valentine.
And then he was a studio singer for many, many years, lots of jingles, lots of backups on records. And he was a conductor, a musical director, and a singer. And my mom gave piano lessons and led glee clubs and choirs. So the music has always been there.
And the Pied Pipers.
And the Pied Pipers. There you go. Yeah. He was. There was a revival of the Pied Pipers. The original Pipers, of course, were not in the group. They were dispersed, not with us anymore. But he was with the Pipers for years and years, touring around the country.
So how about you? When did you first start showing like a talent for music?
I don't ever remember a time when I couldn't sing. Let's put it like that. I sang with my dad all the time, And I started doing jingles for him when I was like 14, 15 years old. So it was like, and to this day, the only thing that I've ever felt secure about in my talent is singing.
Oh, wow. And what a sweet connection with your father that you would sing for him.
Yeah.
That's so sweet. So did you do musicals in high school? What were the shows that you did growing up like as a child before you got into the professional world?
Well, I went to New York City public schools, and I don't know, Jonathan, if you went to New York City public schools, but
To Brooklyn College, as a matter of fact, you also, yes.
you went to Brooklyn College?
Yes, I went to
Oh,
Brooklyn College and I was in
fantastic.
Bay High School. Yes.
Well, we did one musical a year and only seniors could be in it. So I did my first musical my senior year of high school, unlike most of my friends who had been doing musicals from elementary school on, but that my schools never offered it. So when I did that first musical, it was eye-opening to me because you got to do all these things. You got to talk and you got to sing and you got to be funny and you got to make friends. So that was my first indication that that would be something that I like to do. And also, growing up in the city and seeing shows and being exposed to all the arts and culture there, you are exposed, let me use the word again, to all sorts of things. And I saw Funny Girl for maybe it was my 16th birthday, 15th birthday, 16th birthday, probably. And my parents said I walked out of the theater and I looked like a different person. They said I was rocked, just rocked by that experience. And that I think also opened my eyes to, of course, nobody's Barbara Streisand. Let me make that perfectly clear. But it was like, wow, that's amazing to be able to do that. So then I sort of was on a little bit of a trajectory, and I didn't really declare drama until I got to college. I mean, I was looking at departments when I was in high school, but it really, in terms of how young people start now, I was a late bloomer.
Oh, you're talking about the shows that you went to. So your first part on Broadway before the national tour was the Neil Simon, Backrack and David musical, Promises, Promises.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Burt Backrack. To me, he's one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you came on after it started already. So how did you come onto the show? How did you get onto that? And did you get to interact with any of them at all, like Neil Simon or Burt Backrack at all?
No, when you're a replacement,
Mm.
I was a replacement understudy. I was a replacement pit singer. Well, I got the show because I ticked off the boxes that they needed. I went to Ithaca College, upstate New York. And I was after I graduated, went and did my college had a summer stock company program on Martha's Vineyard. And I was doing stock with the vineyard with the players. And I get a call from my dad saying that he was good friends with the musical director of Promises on Broadway, saying Artie told him that they're looking for a girl to replace Patty, and she has to be able to be a real group singer, which I was. She has to be able to sing the Backrack songs, which I knew I could, and she has to be able to play the guitar, which I could. So they set up an audition for me in New York to go and try out for this part. And it was very exciting. I flew to the city from Martha's Vineyard and I did my audition, which I believe to this day was the best audition I ever did. You're young, you don't know any better. And I went back to the Vineyard, and within a day or so, they called and said, "You've got the job." So I was extraordinarily lucky to land that first job right out of school.
Wow.
I think
Yeah.
about it now, I say, God, that was amazing.
Well,
When you're living your life, you don't think anything's amazing.
I know in the moment, we don't really always recognize that moment. You look back and go, wow. Like when you were talking about when you walked out of Funny Girl.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah, that in the Ilene Graff movie about her life, that's a big pivotal moment. Was the rudder that changed the rest of your life? Like,
Pretty much. I mean, at the time, it just felt so huge to me, and I just fell so deeply in love with Barbara, and not realizing that she wasn't that much older than I was. She was
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe 5, 6 years older than me, 7 years. I don't know. She was a kid when she did that show. That passion and that voice and her
Hmm.
presence was startling to me as a 16-year-old.
So you get to
Yeah.
the big stage, like in Broadway or whatever. What was that feeling like when you're the first time you're there?
Well, my job was perfect for a beginner because I wasn't understudy. I wasn't thrown on the stage. I was singing backups in the orchestra pit, which I was very comfortable with because I'd done so much backup singing. And I knew a lot of the, or knew of a lot of the guys in the pit. My dad knew a lot of the players. I was friendly with the musical director, and everybody just made me feel so comfortable and so at home. And our legendary stage manager, and there was a legendary stage manager in New York called Charlie Blackwell, who went on to write the book for a very successful musical called The Tap Dance Kid. But Charlie was the best teacher I think I've ever had in terms of getting his understudies ready to go on. I mean, we religiously had understudy rehearsal every week so that we always knew it was happening. And he really had to teach me how to do a big role. I didn't really know how to do that efficiently and deeply. And Charlie really got me ready. But the first time I went on, I got to the theater early, as I usually do. I had a tuna fish sandwich.
Uh-oh.
Charlie came down as a matinee. He said, "You're on." I went, tuna hanging out of my mouth. Okay, I'm on. And that first time you're on automatic pilot. You don't have time to think about what I'm doing, how I'm doing. I just know that the audience was so appreciative. Sometimes understudies go on and everybody is really, really upset and sad, but they didn't seem to mind that I was there. I got really great hands on my songs, and it it encouraged me that I was in the right place doing the right thing. But it's daunting. I mean, you all of a sudden you're in the real costumes, and somebody's pushing you out on stage and you're acting. I was with Tony Roberts, the most
Oh,
wonderful
wow.
star guy. He was doing the role at the time. And there's Tony Roberts, and I'm acting with him. And it was like, okay, just, rely on muscle memory and just do it. And then
What
it gets easier.
what a great experience. And there's no lonelier place, no matter how much support you have, than standing out there on the boards. There's nothing, there's no other take. You can't cut. You can't,
No,
it's live. And the Charlie Blackwells and all the great, wonderful people who prepped you for it, good
yeah,
on them.
good on
But
them.
they're not there right there. I mean,
No.
you are there. You're suddenly swimming on your own, regardless of all
Yeah,
that.
He then went on to play Sandy on Broadway in Greece, replacing
yeah.
Carol Demas. And we Carol Demas is on here, a very sweet woman.
Oh,
So
she's all.
yes, can you talk about your Greece experience? Did you star opposite Barry Bostwick to begin with?
I had 10 or 11 Danny Zuko's during my 2.5 years doing Grease. But yes, I started out with Barry, and some of the illustrious Zuko's I've worked with are Jeff Conaway, Richard Gere, Treat
Wow.
Williams, Philip Kasnoff.
Wow.
I can't even, I had to make a list. There's a book out called Grease, Tell Me More, which
Right.
is all full of our memories and stories. And I started thinking, write them all down because I just couldn't remember. But Barry was magic. Barry Bostwick is just a magical performer. And he just weaves this amazing charismatic thing that he has. So he was a fantastic first Danny Zuko for me to really learn the show and to get that feeling of why Sandy's so crazy about him and why he's the leader of the boys. And there's so many layers. I, and I truly believe this in the show, and so many complicated friendships and relationships. But Barry really set the pace for that. And my other Zuko's were all, I mean, they all had, oh, Greg Evigan was another one. Uh, they all had their own thing. which was really nice to get to work with so many different guys.
Did you audition for the movie as well? Like, because it seems like everyone did that was in there.
Thank you so much. No, they wouldn't see me because I was too old for the role.
Really?
Whereas Olivia Newton-John is older than me.
Right.
If they had just said, no, we're going with a big star, I would have felt much better about it. And they did. They wanted her, and rightfully so. She really made it her own. And she was a big star, and that's important in the movies. But I was really hurt that that was the explanation. And then when I saw who they hired, I went, oh, why couldn't they just tell me the truth? Why? So no, I did not, but many of my friends and colleagues and co-workers were in the movie. And my husband, my late husband, Ben Lanzarone, also wrote several arrangements for the movie. So there's a real connection to the film, even though I wasn't in it.
Wow. By the way, I thought Stockard Channing was fantastic, but she could have played the principal as well. Like, as far as the ages go, come on, people.
Well, she was like 33 when the movie was done, wasn't she? Or something like that?
I don't know. I have such huge respect for her and her work.
Oh, yeah.
And we are now so much more careful about authentic casting that I don't think it ever would have been cast the way that it was now. They would have gotten kids, real kids, and it would have been great.
Right. So, but you were in the original production of I Love My Wife. Is that correct?
Correct.
Opposite James Naughton, and you appeared on the cast album, which is cool. Tell us about that. You're appearing on the cast album, the show. What was that experience?
Well, I Love My Wife is not a famous show, although we were a Broadway hit. And shows, it used to be that shows didn't have to be mega shows like Phantom or Hamilton, shows that run for decades, Lion King. That wasn't how it used to be. You could run for a few years, be a big hit in New York, in the metropolitan area, but people still would have no idea what your show was. And that's kind of like I Love My Wife. A lot of people don't know about it, but we ran. We did well. It was a huge experience for me. And again, I just so freaking lucky that I got to originate a role in an original Broadway musical. Is something that's on so many people's bucket list, and I got to do it. Never got to do it again, but I did get to do it. It's an experience that I have in my life that I really treasure. It was the music by the great Cy Coleman, book and lyrics by Michael Stewart, who also wrote Bye Bye Birdie and Hello Dolly and like lots and lots of other shows, and directed by Gene Saks, of course, who was like Neil Simon's partner in terms of directing for many. He was incredible. It was a romp. It was 4 people on stage: Lenny Baker, who has passed away, James Naughton, Joanna Gleason, Tony Award winner, and me, and an on-stage band, which was the gimmick and which really sold the show, I think. It was very exciting and Moosie, talking about being alone on the stage, oftentimes you're in like Grease, you're in the show with a lot of people on stage with you. This was just the 4 of us carrying this whole show. Yeah. But we had such a tight bond that I felt that we all had each other's back, and the band, the onstage band, was definitely a character. We really had each other's backs and delighted in each other's company and in giving the audience a laugh, just a laugh, come after work, have fun.
Well, I do have to ask you about one other show that you were in also before we go on, because I was such a huge fan. You were in a Charlie's Aunt with Charles Grodin. Can you talk about him a little bit? What was he like?
He was so funny. He was just so funny. He was a little high strung in a very laid back way. He was almost a hypochondriac. He was like, is it cold in here? Is it hot in here? Is my throat scratchy? And he would just have us roaring when he would start in with that. And smart, like, oh my gosh, so smart and so giving on stage. Just, this, Moosie, some people are just so present and so there for you. And he was definitely of that caliber. And it was very exciting working with him and learning from him and watching what he was doing and how bits evolved and grew. And I loved working with him. There were a lot of other really good people in that show too. It was because we did it on stage for a couple of weeks, but we were ultimately doing it for television. So we had the luxury of being in the rehearsal room for live with a live big at the La Mirada Theater, lots of people in the audience. And then they brought in cameras so that I have the show. It was originally one of the cable companies was going to be doing live theater. I forget what it was called. And then it got absorbed by another company. So they were really gung-ho to make this work. And it was a great experience for those of us that were theater people, which is probably almost everybody that was in that cast had come from theater, to be able to do the two things that we did. You know, we could do theater and then we could do film or television. It was a great combination.
You had done so many shows already. So what prompted that you say, I want to go into TV? What prompted the move to TV?
I thought that was where I belonged. And that really came to me very strongly doing I Love My Wife, because I Love My Wife was essentially a sitcom with fabulous songs. And I'm doing this work and I said, this feels like something I could do on TV. And Broadway was getting beyond my talents at that point. Things were starting to change. Everybody had to dance, and I can't put 2 feet in front of the other. And the demands were getting more and more vocal quality that I didn't have. And I started to feel like I might have, I was a whole 27 years old thinking I'm at the end of the road for Broadway. I look myself and say, what were you thinking? But I was the right age to be in TV, and my husband got called out to LA to write scores for Happy Days. And he said, well, should we go? I said, and at that point was the perfect time to go. I said, yeah, let's go. And he started working right away, long hours, wrote many episodes of TV shows, scoring for TV shows. And I kind of fell into TV the way that I was hoping I would. So it just kind of happened. It was a decision for sure. It was a decision that I thought that my talent would do well on TV. And I was right.
You were right. Yes.
I was right.
Certainly right.
For once in my life, I was right.
Your first listed credit that I was looking at was on the show Brothers and Sisters, which kind of had tried to emulate Animal House, I remember. So what was it like? Because you had been on a lot of shows. What's it like now to see yourself on screen on TV that is going out to so many millions of people?
It's agony. I had done a lot of commercials. So I was used to seeing myself on TV. But as you know, the care that they take doing commercials is like nothing. I mean, everything is perfect. You look perfect. You're doing everything perfect. Everything is perfect, and it takes forever to get them done. So I was used to seeing myself on TV from all the commercials that I did. I think my first show was Barnaby Jones, actually. I think that was the first one. And I think it was a really good introduction to doing one camera film because everybody was so nice.
Who was she?
When she ran away as a teenager, her name was Diana Scott.
Who wants her found?
Mr. Adams never said. I asked, but he ignored me, which meant don't ask.
They were, of course, Lee Merriweather as an angel, and his name just went out of my head. Buddy Ebsen was so laid back and so sweet, and they made my first foray into this new form doable, and they were just so encouraging. I really haven't had any bad experiences on set, to tell you the truth, but they were really great for a newcomer.
I want to talk about a show you did it had a real cult following, and I think I read that it was the most expensive show on TV, and it was it Super Train? Was it they were comparing it to a Love Boat, but it really wasn't? What was the show?
It was called Super Train,
Okay.
and you're right. It was supposed to sort of be like Love Boat on a Train, except it was a mystery. The show was not doing well.
Mhm.
After 3 episodes, they fired a bunch of the cast. Like that was the problem. And so I was hired as part of a replacement cast, always a replacement. And I don't know what they expected of us, that we just say the words they give us, we don't
Yeah.
write it. We're going to save the show, 3 new little actors. But it was a big experience. The show was huge. The train sets were phenomenal. They were perfect down to the last little thing. We worked with a lot of guest stars, and I got to sing on the show, which
Oh,
was
nice.
fantastic. They came to me and they said, you're Broadway, right? I said, yeah, I'm Broadway. They said, we're going to have a scene in the club, and do you want to sing a song? I said, yes, I do. They said, okay, sing whatever you want. Doesn't really matter. Just make sure it's something that people know. So we had this arrangement that we did of I Want to Hold Your Hand, the Beatles, not like the Beatles did it. We did it in a very unique way. So we said, okay, and they set up a recording session, and it was all swell and good. And then they realized that they had to pay the rights for I Want to Hold Your Hand. But we did it. It was glorious. It was so much fun. And again, it's great to have that tucked away in the pile of
Yeah.
DVDs. It is what it is, as they say. There was a lot of pressure, certainly, because the expectations were so high for the show. They put so much money into it, and they didn't want to go down as the biggest flop in TV history. So
Right.
we worked incredibly long hours. I used to work, I made twice my salary in overtime.
Wow.
And there was a day that we were working so long, and, touch-ups, Moosie, all day,
Yeah.
you have this, you have that. And I don't know what time it was, 11:30 at night, been working since 6 in the morning, and the makeup artist comes over with a brush, and I said, don't touch me. My skin was like raw. I was like, no more. This is what you're
Yeah.
getting. But it was,
Buddy.
I'll tell what it was, though, was a great
Hmm.
opportunity to be on what was then the MGM lot, and to feel that history, and go to the commissary and see Paul Newman walking around, and, all of that Hollywood stuff that's.
I do want to ask you about another show that you were on, which I enjoyed at the time, and I was also a big fan of Gabe Kaplan. You were on Lewis and Clark, so it was after Carter. What do you remember about that show?
Uh, it was, Gabe said at the time, this is going to be the show that people say, oh, I think that's the show he did after Cotter. I pretty much have fun whatever I'm doing, because I'm always so grateful to be there. And it was a goofy cast. I mean, it was full of these interesting people that I never would work with before. And we enjoyed ourselves. I knew that it wasn't the greatest thing that ever came down the pike, but I was there.
Always a fan of Gabe Kaplan. So he was cool to work with. He
Yeah,
seemed, yeah.
yeah, he was. He's kind of like many comedians we know, are kind of reserved people. They're not terribly they're not sitting around being jocular, making jokes all day. That's not, observational comedians are that. They're very observational, and they look and see what's going on, and what can I use that? Can I use that? Can I use that? But he was
Yeah.
always very kind to me, lovely to me. And our kids oddly ended up going to the same elementary school, so I would see him every once in a while, and it was always, nice to see him. He became quite a gambler.
Yeah, I was gonna say, was he on his way to the track? Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about Mr. Belvedere. Such a great sitcom, a classic. To start with, how did you wind up on the show?
Auditions,
Yeah.
you go into an audition. Back in the day, of course, you'll remember this, Moosie, they used to deliver scripts to your door when you were going to audition for something.
Yep.
So many, many scripts had come to my door. So this one came and my husband and I are reading it and he said to me, "Oh, don't worry, this one's yours." And I said, "How can you even say that?" He said, "I just know it has your name written all over it. Don't even worry about it." I said, "Yeah, right." Okay. So I had an audition. It must have been a first audition that I don't remember. Callback with the producers, and I felt that crackle of interest. I think I had one callback with the producers and maybe some Fox people. I don't remember. No, I thought it was still in the office. And then nicely enough, I just kept progressing. And then the next audition was for ABC for network. Network auditions are when you're down to the final 2 or 3 people, and it's literally at the network. They have this little sort of like a screening room, kind of, right, Moosie? That's sort of what it
Yeah.
feels like. And
Yeah. It
yeah,
gets serious then because you go to the
yeah,
network, you have to sign, you're already signing a contract and you may not do the show. So so if you
exactly.
don't get it, you're seeing what your life could have been. And so were you at Century City, the network, or did you go to
Oh, Century
Prospect?
City.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Century
Century
City. Yeah.
City. And Bob Uecker was there. He was attached to the show. And Christopher Hewitt was one of the people that was auditioning for Mr. Belvedere. He had directed me in a musical in New
I was
York.
going to say, you
So
worked with him
I knew
before then,
him.
right? Yeah.
Yes, I'd worked with him before, and we got really excited to see each other and said, "We got to get this job. We'll get to hang out. We have to get this." And went in for the net. And there's all these important people at these network auditions. It's all the people from the production, from Fox at the time, all the big bosses, the bosses from the network, bosses from casting at vice presidential level. But I walked in and met Bob, and my nerves went away. I said, "I like this guy." And he obviously liked me. And he's joking around and kidding around. And I gave him back as good as he gave me. And there just was a connection,
Yeah.
And I left the audition feeling pretty good. I said, I don't know. I don't know who they could
Yeah.
get that would just click with him so strongly. And then happily enough, that deal that I signed before I went into audition for 7 years
Yeah.
went into effect, and we went to work.
I wish more knew what it was like to read for the network. It's some serious business. I mean, there are suits, it's a comedy sometimes, and they're just like, and you walk out and you go, no one's hated me more than those people just now. And then you get home and you booked it, there's no reading it, it's crazy, crazy.
And I probably would have felt that way too, except that I felt connected to Bob.
Yeah.
I would have probably felt that way.
Well, and the chemistry continued on the show. We saw it. I mean, you guys really, really did such a great job. It was very funny.
Thank you.
It was very,
Well,
because my next question was about Uecker, and so apparently you loved him.
I loved him so much. And the kids and I, Tracy Wells, who's now Tracy Tofty,
Yeah.
fantastic realtor if you need anything, Bryce Beckham and Rob Stone and I just in April went to Milwaukee for Bob's memorial. He died just short of his 91st birthday. And there was a big, huge memorial for him in Milwaukee, to which we were invited. And it was great. And we got to spend time with his wife, Judy, who was definitely part of our family as well. And to see the incredible love that the whole state of Wisconsin, he called those Brewers games for 54 years. But he had acting experience, just not long form. He had done many commercials. He was, well, he always wasn't played this character that he plays. He was one of Johnny Carson's favorite guests.
Yeah.
He was on, I don't remember how many, but many,
Yeah.
and was hilarious. And so when they said, you could be in a show, he said, "Yeah, I could be in a show." But the thing about him that was so many things about him were impressive, but just talking about not being an actor,
Uh-huh.
during the pilot, He just came to Christopher and me and said, look, you're the pros. You know what you're doing. I don't know what I'm doing. So anything that you need for me to do, just tell me, teach me how to do this, show me how to do that. It's absolutely fine. So he was, and what a generous thing for the star to say to us. And then we realized, yeah, but he's an athlete. He's been used to
Yeah.
being coached his whole life. It doesn't mean there's no ego involved. Put
But
your
he-
hand higher, put your hand lower,
Right. But he was smart enough and cognizant enough to know, okay, these people, this is their arena. It would
Mhm.
behoove me to be guided by them. Now, if you want to go hit a curveball,
He may not be the person to go to.
actually, what a great, that's hilarious, by the way. What a great bit. He made it such a big splash with, I don't think it was a beer commercial. It looks like I'm
Yeah.
in the front
What,
row.
the Miller Lights. The
Yeah.
Miller
Miller
Lite.
Lite. Miller Lite.
Everyone's, all my buddies were like, I'm in the front row,
That's
emulating
exactly it, because,
Uecker. It's huge.
A commercial that was done like 40 years ago is still, that catchphrase is still used today.
Isn't that something?
Yes.
At the stadium, there is a bronze statue of Bob sitting at the very top of the stands, just for that, and people go there and they take pictures with it. And I agree, it's pretty amazing. Yeah, and
Wow.
of course, Major League, where he made up all his own dialogue.
Right.
Oh,
Didn't
did
have a
he?
script. He made it all up. He just
Well, because of
and
what
he
you
was
just said, what was your shooting schedule like? Because I read that, he had to go to do all this baseball schedule. So everyone had to work around his schedule, like calling games or going, baseball sending him here. So what was your schedule like to shoot the show?
it was pretty easy. We just worked around those times that he knew he was working. So we started later than most shows, because that was still the end of baseball season, and depending on whether the Brewers went into postseason or whatever. So we just started later. And when spring training came around, hiatus weeks would get adjusted. So it really wasn't, it was okay. But there were definitely times where after we were done, it's a wrap, there would be a car waiting at the stage door to take him to the helipad at ABC News, to take him to the airport where he would get on a plane and go to where the next game was so he could call the game.
Wow.
But baseball was his first love, and everybody recognized that, and we were grateful for that, because without baseball, we wouldn't have had a show. And it just made us feel so different. We were cool.
Yeah.
So you had been on several shows, but nothing like this. So, Mr. Belvedere eventually became part of the TGI Friday lineup.
Right.
When did you first start feeling like this was a hit? This we're going to be around a while.
It was rough. We never knew when we were going to get picked up, because we weren't a top 10 show. And there were times where they would pick us up for half a season or for 3 shows, or
Yeah.
we were canceled. One day I get a call from my agent. I'm so sorry, you're canceled. I was like, of course, your heart breaks, and it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen to, it was unfathomable. Then a couple hours later, I get a call from my agent. Not so fast. They're rethinking everything. Literally in one day, things would turn around. So the first time, I don't remember which season it was, maybe season 2 or 3, that we got a full order for 22 episodes, sort of breathed easy for a while. And I went out and I bought a fancy car, and my license plate said 22 more.
Oh, that's great.
I kept that car for 20 years.
That's great. Belvedere was the first show, I believe, to address AIDS. Is that correct? Like,
I think we were probably the first sitcom, first family comedy. Yeah, that addressed AIDS. And that was because our executive producers and writers, the creators of the show, their management team, husband and wife management team, lost a baby to AIDS from a blood transfusion. And they were twins. 2 babies were born. a boy and a girl. The boy needed a blood transfusion. The little boy died from the blood transfusion. The little girl then faced such discrimination about AIDS because people were afraid that she was a carrier or she could give it to them. They couldn't get her into preschool. And there was so much bad information before we knew any better, before the general public knew any better, that they felt very strongly that we needed to be a platform about HIV. And that's how that episode came to be.
I know you're asked this all the time, but we want to know here, what was your favorite episode of Belvedere?
Well, the HIV episode was one, but selfishly, if I'm being honest, my favorite episode to do was when Robert Goulet was our guest star. And the plot was that George, I don't remember what the setup was, whether he was unhappy with the way his life was going, his career or something, and he was taking a bath and the radio fell into the bathtub and he got shocked and he came out of the bath and said, I know what it is that I have to be. I know what I want to be, a lounge singer. They came up with these very, very silly ideas. So George decides to be a lounge singer. And one day there's a knock on the door. When we open the door, and it's Robert Goulet saying, I hear that George wants to be a lounge singer. I can help him. It made no sense. It made absolutely no sense at all. But George did get to go sing in a nightclub. And they had my husband write all the arrangements and he was on screen and our friends, the drummer and the bass player were all in it. And I don't know what the reasoning was, why they decided that Goulet and I were going to sing a duet together. But we did, and I get up on stage and Goulet and I sang Our Love Is Here to Stay. And it was the silliest episode, but I loved every minute of it. And I just thought it was so nice of them to give me that gift of singing a duet with
no need to preface that with selfishly, because that's just us. Robert Goulet, forget about it. Come on. That's
what a voice. What a voice.
Yeah.
Well, besides Goulet, you had so many great guest stars and recurring characters. So, were there any that stood out to you, like, for good or for bad? Anyone that really stood out to you?
We loved Willie Garson so much. Willie, who went on to great fame on Sex and the City. He was a recurring character and he was as much of the family as anybody. And we just adored him. And I, oddly enough, ran into him in line to get into the PT Palace in Florence. And all of a sudden I see Willie. I went, Willie? He said, I'm seeing people all over the place. But he was so good and so funny and such a great guy. And we always were so happy to get a script and to look up and say, Willie's here. And let's see, who else did, the girl, she's going to kill me. I know her as well as I know anybody, who played Heather's friend. Michelle Matheson was also one of our absolute favorite guests who, she also was recurring, and it always was a little more fun when Michelle was around. And then we had like episodes. There was a poker episode where Dr. Joyce Brothers and Susan Anton, and I can't even remember how many like famous people were there on the set playing poker with Bob and Mr. Belvedere.
What a great show to have been on.
Thank you. Yeah. And the kids and I are still very close. They look out for me. They check in on me, and I'm so proud of them and everything they've accomplished. And they're just as human beings, as kind and sweet as they could be.
Every time I see Rob, I walk away saying the exact same thing. That's such a good guy, like we have a few things in common. I see him at the DGA. He's a drummer. Right. Like, we grew up as child actors, and I just really, really appreciate him. He's such a good guy. Yeah.
The poker episodes, you should have had Gabe Kaplan as a guest there.
What were they thinking?
Yeah.
Oh my God, of course.
Oh gosh, Uecker and Kaplan.
Oh God.
Yeah, that's funny.
So the first time I was Every once in a while, Johnny Carson would have, when he was shooting in New York, would have casts of Broadway shows on The Tonight Show just to promote Broadway.
Yeah.
And we did we did a Grease number, like a mashup of some numbers. So there we are on the Carson show. But before us, the guest introductory comedian was Gabe Kaplan.
Oh, wow.
And he killed. He killed. And when I got the show and I was talking to him, I said, we did a number from Greece right after you, and you were phenomenal. And he was so appreciative of that. He said, "You were there?" I said, "Yeah, we were there. We were waiting to go on, and you were doing so well that we were afraid we were going to get bumped." But Carson, if somebody was doing great, he would just keep them on and keep them on and bump guests. But we got on right at the very end. But that was a great experience to see him as a young guy making it on Johnny Carson.
Absolutely.
In the sixth season, that's when they moved you to Saturday nights. What was the feeling among the cast? Did everyone think, "Oh, this is it, it's not good" at that time?
We didn't like it very much.
Yeah.
When they start moving you around, you feel like they're losing confidence in you. And we liked our Friday night spot.
Right.
It was a good spot. Did we have Benson? We had Webster, definitely, but that lineup was really strong. And then when they started breaking up the lineup, it was like, why, they obviously know more than we do, but we were concerned. And then I think they moved us again. I don't remember, it was such a long time ago.
I really miss the family 4-camera lineup, the Benson, Mr. Belvedere, Webster, whatever. I just miss that. There's not enough of it anymore, so much reality TV, and nothing wrong with that either. I just miss that. I miss the multicam.
Well, I think that, of course, audiences change, viewing habits changed. I don't know if any families sit around after supper and watch TV together. I doubt very much that happens very much.
They sit around and they do this.
Yeah, sometimes I'll look around and see just people paying no attention to each other at all. And you can't fight progress, and I wouldn't dream of doing it. But I agree with you, Moosie. There was something, and I grew up in the 50s and early 60s where we had 3 channels, and in New York we had WPIX, and we had Channel 5, we had $1 Million Movie. But after dinner, if you had a TV, you all sit around and watch Ed Sullivan together and Lucy, and
absolutely.
and it just was a different time, and I'm kind of glad that I had that time.
Yeah. So your husband Ben,
Yeah.
I gotta tell you. So folks don't know, he passed maybe around a year ago,
Yeah, a year ago, February.
Yeah. It wasn't until maybe, I don't know, I'm going to guess about 6 months after I had known him, because I see you all the time, and I would run into you and Ben and all that stuff. He is you've already spoken so much about his own career. He was so accomplished and so talented, but I never knew anything about him because he is a gentleman. And at these events I would see you at, this is your time. And he just didn't seem to have an ego. And he and I, and a couple of the others would kind of like step back and watch our beautiful partners do their thing and all that stuff. And we talk a little bit. He was a man who was so sweet. And I just admired him. And when I found out, like, oh my goodness, Happy Days and all these other things, it's like, so many people, without asking, will tell you about all their credits and everything they did and all this stuff, you know what I mean? Without even, like in the first 10 minutes, I had no idea. And he could have sold encyclopedias door to door for all I knew, but he was such a non-egotistical supporter of his partner. And I just, he was great, man. And it's great. And it says a lot about you, people like that attract each other. Good people attract each other.
Well, he was, as you said, ridiculously talented. And he always liked his work to speak for itself. If he felt in a social situation that it would, or if people asked him questions, he would always respond and talk about what he did and his career and all the amazing people he worked with and
Yeah.
etc. But he would never just volunteer that information. It just wasn't him. And what was interesting was we had a wonderful memorial for him at Forest Lawn when he died. And it was sold out. I mean, it was just
Yeah.
incredible. There were so many people there. They had to bring in folding chairs and people were sitting outside. And so many people who knew him would come up to me and say, I had no idea that he had done this and that and the other thing. And they'd known him for years and years and years. And said, I was shocked. He played for Frank Sinatra. He wrote music for the movie of Grease. He did all, he was a concert pianist. They just didn't know because, as you say, he didn't like to blow his own horn.
Yeah.
The talent was what drew me to him in the first place because he was so crazy good at what he did. And I was very, very proud of him. And his loss is gigantic. He was not only my life partner, we were married for almost 47 years, he was my musical partner. And that part of my life now is kind of shut down because I'd only worked with him for almost 50 years.
Yeah.
So trying to rebuild that is complicated.
Understood.
We didn't even have to talk about what the arrangements should sound like. I could say jazz waltz and he'd go, oh, I know what you mean. And then like magically, not magically, a million years worth of experience, he knew exactly what I wanted and how it should go. And I respected so much, I'm shaking here, what he brought to the table.
Yeah.
I miss him and I miss that so much. But thank you for your kind words about him.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for.
And Jonathan, I think a lot of that is Brooklyn. He was a Brooklyn boy through and through, 100%. He was a street kid, and he had a toughness about him that a lot of people didn't know about him. But it came from growing up on the streets of Brooklyn. You don't brag, you don't get in anybody's face.
Right.
You survive, and and you're interesting.
That's noble.
I think the word survive, I think that definitely the survival instinct is definitely part of that from growing up in that area for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do want to ask you about you worked with one, legend in from baseball for Bob Uecker. Then you worked with a comedy legend, Rodney Dangerfield in Ladybugs. What was that experience like with Rodney?
I never thought of it quite the way you put it, that I've worked with two like genuine, and Robin Williams, another legend, and three more different guys you couldn't even imagine. Rodney was the fastest writer I had ever seen in my life. We would be doing a scene or another scene would be done while we're waiting to do our next scene, and they would come over to him and say, we need a better joke here. This joke's not landing. We need something else. And within seconds, he would give them 4, 5, 6 jokes that they could use to substitute, one better than the other. And I would just look at him in amazement, saying, how do you do that? He said, it's what I do. It's not, how do I do it? I just do it. It's just who I am. And I had such respect for his ability as a writer. It was incredible. He was, again, a very contrary to his public persona, very quiet, guarded, not nice. He was very, very nice to me. He would answer, like, I would ask him questions because I just wanted to hear him talk and say, so tell me about the window business, or some little tidbit about his life that I would find that I found interesting. And he would always tell me stories. But again, as an observational comic, he was always, seeing what was going on. And, you just wondered what's going to show up in the next routine. Working with Robin Williams and Jonathan Winters on Mork and Mindy, again, such an education. Just seeing them back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. You say, how does that happen? And
Speaking
they
of legends,
loved,
yes.
yeah,
So,
legends. And they loved each other so much and got such a kick out of each other that sometimes it was exhausting because you couldn't keep up. And I would have to excuse myself, like from the lunch table, and walk away and say, I can't
Yeah.
keep up with these guys. I can't. And you work with some of those people in your life, and you see their ability, their natural born talent, their skill, their craft, their commitment, and their humanity. And when you get all, and their professionalism, and when you get all of that in one person, you get a successful performer, I think.
Yeah. As an actor, you're supposed to tell yourself, open the mind, I can do anything. But he's one of those people that once you have to just tip your hat, you go, I couldn't do that. Like
I
what he's
couldn't,
doing right now. No.
never in a million years.
Nope.
Never.
I have to ask about one role you did because it was my father's favorite musical, and he always went around singing Some Enchanted Evening constantly. I remember that's what I remember growing up. So can you talk about being in South Pacific? You're with Glenn Close, Harry Connick Jr. So tell me about your memories of that.
All glorious, just glorious. We did pre-records in Sydney of singing stuff. And Sydney's a great, great town. I went to the theater twice a day. I just constantly go. I went to the opera. It's just there for you. Then we flew up to Port Douglas, which is on the Great Barrier Reef. And it was probably undoubtedly the biggest production I'd ever been in. Beulah Land was pretty big, but this was even bigger. It was a meticulous recreation of a base in the South Pacific on an island. I mean, our Patricia von Brandenstein, Oscar Award winner for Amadeus, was our designer. So everything was meticulously researched, meticulously done. And then you add on to that you're working with one of the biggest movie stars ever, Glenn Close, who's just like
Mhm.
a mom. Her daughter was with her, her sister was with her, and she was kind of normal, for being in a different stratosphere. And Harry Connick Jr. was just one of the gang. He fit in with everybody. And I made nice friends doing it. And Lori Tan Chin, who went on to great fame in Orange is the New Black, and Nora, Aquafina's Nora from Queens. And it was glorious. The music, oh my God, Some Enchanted Evening, and Gonna Wash That Man Right Out of My
A great
Hair. And
production too.
Yeah.
great. I mean, the production values were astonishing, and I just loved it. I just loved it. I pinched myself sometimes. One night I had a scene with Glenn, like just a plain acting scene, me and Glenn. That was it. And I was a little nervous. I'm not a nervous person. I usually don't get too nervous. And she said, "What's wrong with you? You're acting nervous." I said, "I have to do a scene with Glenn Close." And she thought that was hilarious.
So let me ask you about your book, What the Other Mothers Know. I love the fact, a practical guide to child rearing told in a really nice, funny way that won't make you feel like a complete idiot the way all those other parenting books do. Love that title. It's just so. What can you
Great.
tell us about it and the impetus behind writing it? 'Cause I read that it was a trip to In-N-Out Burger. That's
Yeah,
right.
well, my friend, the very eminent casting director, Donna Rosenstein, and I went down to Orange County to see my daughter, who's also a musical theater performer, in a show. And we went and got a bite to eat before the show. And we got a hamburger. And she said, here we are eating a hamburger. I didn't know that if you're ordering from In-N-Out, you have to put your order in 3 days ahead. I said to the teacher, I'd bring hamburgers for Georgie's birthday party. And I get there and they said, well, we can't do 30 hamburgers right now. And she said, meanwhile, all these other mothers were coming in and getting their orders and walking out. And I said, we were in show business. What did we know? And I said, yeah, I understand. She said, yeah, the other mothers, they know everything. We know nothing. And we said, you know what? What the other mothers know could be a book. And it grew from there. We just turned it into a book. We had a third partner, Michelle Gendelman, who was a successful TV writer. And we put the book together, and it's funny. And it's just another thing to be able to say, yeah, I wrote a book. Whoa. really giving me a lot of fulfillment to be able to talk about my show, the show and career and the trauma that happened and moving forward. It means a lot to me to be able to share with people. My daughter, thankfully, maintains my website, ilenegraff.com, because I'm not good at it, and she really is. So that's it. And she's always yelling at me because I'm not good at Instagram or any of those other things. I say, I can't.
Listen, we had to teach our parents to do the clock on the oven, right? Just
The boom, boom.
yeah, 12, yeah. So, all righty.
Well, Ilene, thank you again for coming on. Such a pleasure getting to speak to you and hear all your stories. We were really looking forward to this, and thank you.
Thank you
Really.
so much. It was great to be with you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Eileen.
Well, again, this has been Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen with Moosie Drier. Again, a very special thanks to Ilene Graff. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thank you for tuning in to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast. Listening to this podcast just makes you really cool.